Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. It is another Saturday and I thought what good day to give a speech on the internet. Hi, this is Not Quite a Degree, where we talk about things that I don't necessarily have a degree in, but I do have opinions on, or I learned something about something that I want to share with the internet because sharing with the internet is a good thing. Anyway, I am in the middle of my, exam phase, which means I also have a lot of papers to write and like a lot of time that I sit on my desk and just stare at a screen and think thoughts. And I don't know if that is related to the new year, if that is related to just me living on my own now, but a change has taken place in my life. I have been thinking a lot about the concept of time, of growing older, just generally how I see a lot of things. And I found that was such an interesting concept that I thought is it just me, or is there like other people out there who feel the same about this? Well, in the beginning of the year, everyone was raving about how it's like a new decade, where were you 10 years ago, all of that. And I didn't necessarily feel too touched by that in that moment. But then over the last couple of weeks, I've been realizing, well, maybe I haven't really been touched by it because 10 years ago, basically, I was 14. And if you kind of put that in perspective, basically, that last decade was the first part of my life that I consciously lived through. I mean, obviously you do have a developed conscious before 14 and you do have memories from that, but I feel like 14 is kind of the time where you actually start actively influencing your own life through your own choices because you're given more choice as opposed to being a child where everyone's just making every decision for you. And reflecting on that, I realized, okay, so it does make sense that this decade thing kind of doesn't really work for me because I'm born literally in the middle of a decade. So whenever a new decade is going to start, I'm going to be in the middle of a decade for me, like at 25 now. A new decade doesn't really mean anything for me because I feel like everything in my life still is on this like big 30. You know, how everyone's like freaking out in their 20s, being like, oh my god, I'm gonna turn 30 in like 5 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is. And so I'm not really affected by the decade ending. However, I am affected by the thought that I am halfway through the decade that is my life right now. Which is terrifying, in a way. For the first time in my life, really, the thought of like, fuck, it's gonna be like another 5 years until you turn 30. And I know that's just an arbitrary number, but still, it was the first time that I made that realization, and it was a thing. Now, taking this another step further, being like, okay, I realize decades are a thing. I'm in a decade that is a thing. What is the thing of my decade, basically? So I haven't really been looking back on the last 10 years of my life, but just kind of like what has happened since I turned 20 and how is that affecting me now? And I realized something really interesting happened and I feel like this is the point that I want to share this week with people, is how I changed from, say, 21 to now in the way how I see my own work and my own projects and how that's kind of affecting me emotionally. When I was 21, 22, and I have touched on that in prior videos, I oftentimes felt very much the whole drama scheme that I just played on turning 30 was dawning on me on a very different scale. It was pretty much not like this big realization being like, it's another 5 years, damn girl. It was more like, oh my god, you're getting older. It was like a constant at the back of my mind in some way, and I felt like I was always lagging behind and like everything I was doing wasn't enough, in the sense that adulthood was approaching so fast and I just was in no way prepared and just like generally felt overwhelmed all the time and like didn't know where to start, and like it was just all too much, but I was all blaming it on myself. I always felt like it was my fault that I wasn't progressing. Now that I am a couple years older, literally 2-3 years older, I'm like so much more chill all of a sudden about all my projects, about my abilities, and I think like objectively not much has changed. Obviously, I learned more things in my bachelor's, all of that. Like, yes, I did. But it's not like I have something that proves success to myself or something where I'm like, I read this book and had this epiphany and now I'm like so smart. No. nothing really changed, and yet I feel so much more comfortable with myself, about my projects, about everything that I do, and thus I get to it so much faster. Like, I can sit down these days and have a pretty constant flow, being concentrated on whatever it is that I'm doing, and I feel like I get to the point where I'm like, okay, this is the step that I need to take, and then I actually take it, or I know when I'll take it in the future. And it's like such a different vibe that I'm like, where's that coming from? Like, have I found some secret formula of being like a wizard of self-confidence? Well, and as we do sometimes on this channel, I actually, as my science educated self, took to the internet of databases of universities. I don't have a psychology background, but has read one paper, knows psychology. I basically looked into like what is there on my age bracket that science says, like what's happening to us as a group of people. I found out something that doesn't necessarily relate to this directly. However, I think it's really super interesting that the stages of adulthood actually today are a field of interest that people have not necessarily come to a conclusion to. Like, we don't really know yet fully how adulthood is built in its stages for people, and how maturity plays into that, how different neuropsychological factors play into that. And then the age bracket that I'm in right now, and that's not necessarily completely defined either from what I gather from the research, but roughly your 20s, has actually gotten its own name now, and apparently is an interesting field of research. Here it comes. We are in the emerging adulthood phase. Emerging adulthood. What a wonderful word. Basically, it's a second puberty because society has changed so much that puberty isn't enough anymore. Isn't that great? I mean, we all thought that acne was gone. Well, my acne taught me something different. We all thought puberty was gone. Well, life is teaching me differently now. So I read this paper that has been published recently about how self-criticism is part of being in that phase of emerging adulthood and how that affects you in later life. Self-criticism, and that is probably still a broad term, is actually found the younger you are in your emerging adulthood phase. And I think that's so cool to be like, it's not just me, it's not just us type A people who have nothing else to worry about in their life than themselves, their own success, and whatever other things are affecting them in life. No, it's actually like a psychological thing that happens to people this age. And I'm like, thank God I'm not alone. So just to give you a quick definition of what self-criticism is. It is a low-order personality trait representing a tendency to set unrealistically high and rigid standards and harsh negative evaluation of oneself. High self-criticism is characterized by a preoccupation with achievement and negative appraisal of the self, including guilt and fear of losing approval when failing to live up to certain standards. Didn't need to be attacked like that. What is the most interesting thing about this paper and why that relates to my life and why that might also relate to your life is because they found out that in your 20s, it's from the age of 23 where you start to change that. 23 roughly apparently seems to be the part of time where you kind of start to cease being super critical with yourself and the world, and can actually start concentrating not only on yourself, and that's another really interesting part, but also much better on people around you. Another thing that I've been dealing a lot with in my life lately is that I feel like my perception of the world is more and more starting to be like, it's not just me. Like, there is other people around me. I want to interact with them. I want to understand them more. And this whole thing of like reflecting on other people, apparently lower your self-criticism is, the higher your thinking about other people and reflecting generally on others and yourself later in your life. So what has my research taught me? 2 things. 1, it's completely normal to be completely freaked out by everything you do and how it's not working in your early 20s. 2, no, actually 2.5 anyway, to the first point, there's also nothing you can do about that other than aging. Isn't that wonderful? Like, aging actually has good things about it. Who would have thunk? And the second thing is, if you get older and you kind of start to realize that you're getting a bit more chill about yourself, that is also a really good point in life to start reflecting more on others and to actively make an effort to look at the world at large and look at the world around you. What's out there? Who's out there? What are they thinking? How are they thinking? How are they self-criticizing or not? And I'm like, yes, maybe that is what my 20s and what this next part of my 20s is gonna be like. And I'm really excited for that, actually, because that means I can finally chill a bit more and learn a bit more and be excited about things that happen outside of this little box here. I hope this was interesting or helpful. In the still January time of we're looking at life, we're looking at what we're changing, maybe have a think about what I just said and about where you're at in your 20s, in your emerging adulthood, in your second crazy puberty that is taking place right now, or maybe in your first puberty or wherever you are in life when you're watching this. I hope you're really doing well, whatever it is that you're doing, and I would love to see you back on this channel for another rambly video of me talking about things where I probably should get a degree in first before I kind of wave around papers from a certain area. I have started doing something last week, which I think is a really cool idea, where I shout out other people and encourage you to tell me who you like. So that's the first thing. If you have somebody where you think, hey, I think she would like to watch their videos, shoot me a message, give me a comment, whatever, because I'm always looking for new people to watch. And I want to shout out My Reading is Odd this week. I have found her, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I am kind of a bit critical, no, not critical about book 2, but I'm very picky about who I watch when I watch YouTube, because I feel like a lot of it can be quite, not to offend anybody, but repetitive. And I really like her. I think she's really sympathetic. And so why not go watch her? Also, she has nice hair and nice thumbnails, I think. So do that. And once you're done there, feel free to come back next week or whenever I put up the next video. So until then, bye!